What's going on, good people? Dr. P in the building. How you doing? Hope you're all doing well. Here's a interesting aspect I recognized about me. I did a speaking event several weeks ago, and I got the pictures back and the videos back and whatnot from the event. And as I was analyzing my presentation, I noticed that my button-up collar with my tie wasn't properly adjusted. Take a look, right? And I'm wondering, like, why does my tie or my collar button the way that I want it to, when I started the presentation? And what I realized is that my jawline is lower than my trap line. So you see my traps up here compared to where my jaw is? That's why my collars don't button with the tie. And it just dawned on me, like, that's what it was. I thought it's like maybe I'm moving around on the stage and I'm talking and my tie and my collar just comes undone. No, it's because of my traps. And I said, dang. And so I brought this to my wife's attention, and she was like, you need to stop working out. You look ridiculous. Where is your neck? And my neck is there, but it's hidden with these mountains I got called traps. And, back in the day when I played football, I used to do a lot of working out, and, my traps just started to develop the way that they are. And it's just something that I guess I've been blessed with, but now it's sort of kind of like a curse because I can't really find good button down shirts with the tie. I can't button the top collar properly, or it looks like I'm choking. So it's just an interesting, funny shaped body that I got among all the many funny shaped individuals we got on the planet, right? But I'm just grateful that I got good health and strength, and still, even though I got some what do you call it, salt and pepper going on in my beard, in my whatever I got left in my head, I'm still able to be independent and manage and still have some functionality all over my body. So I'm in good shape, and I'm grateful for that. But anyway, what I wanted to talk about was dysfunctional people. More importantly, people who come from underserved communities are addicted to chaos. Let me explain what I mean by that. As a former cop, as a former kid who grew up in an underserved community myself, I can vouch for this. People who come from underserved communities are addicted to chaos. In fact, chaos is normal. It's normalized in the communities or in the household they come from that are nestled within underserved communities. We call that a dysfunctional family. When dysfunction is normalized, it doesn't appear chaotic or abnormal when they show up and behave abnormal or dysfunctional in whatever setting. It could be school, work, some type of extracurricular activity. It could be a bar or a place where you're supposed to go and have fun. Let underserved, dysfunctional people show up, and they'll bring that normalized, chaotic, rambunctious behavior in that environment and make it disruptive for everybody else that's there who knows how to behave themselves in that environment. And here's the catch-22, or here's the issue. Here's the main issue with normalized dysfunction or normalized chaos. When these people who come from underserved communities, and let me say this too. Let me make sure I preface this correctly. People who come from dysfunctional communities or underserved communities, right, that are not reformed, meaning either they went to prison and they, came out reformed and started acting right because they realized that dysfunctional behavior wasn't worth it, or they found a way, they lost enough, they hit rock bottom in some way, shape, or form, and they say, you know what, that form of thinking is no longer effective. That was my route. I recognized that the thought process I developed while coming from a dysfunctional community or an underserved community wasn't going to profit me. In fact, I lost way more than I gained with that mentality. I like to call it the ego. The ego we develop to keep ourselves safe from an environment or from the threats in that environment. We take it with us wherever we go, and it causes us to remain stuck. So the very thing that we lean on for protection, the ego or the mentality, ends up becoming our prison, which ultimately keeps us safe from the outside world but stuck in place. Okay, and so that's what most people who come from underserved communities are contending with. They enter into the world, or they enter into adulthood with a deficit. They don't know all the proper etiquettes, how to speak, how to conduct themselves, how to behave in a way that's safe and acceptable to everybody else around that wants to enjoy the environment or the peace of the environment. So much so that whenever they go to whether it's a Waffle House, whether it's a Walmart, whether it's a one of those places that got the video games and the food and the drinks and all that, whether it's work, whether it's school, when these dysfunctional individuals who are non-reformed show up and show out, and they are held accountable by either someone else who knocks them out or a police officer who comes up and holds them accountable for that disorderly conduct, everyone is going to scream, "Oh, you didn't have to do that. The cop didn't have to do that to that person. Why did they act like that? Why did that cop do that? That was unreasonable. That was excessive." Now they want to sue. Now they want to find a way to hold the person accountable who held the dysfunctional person accountable, who's operating in their normal chaos in an environment that's not used to the chaos. I hope that makes sense. Let me run it back again. A person who comes from an underserved community usually is raised in a dysfunctional setting, somehow, some way. Either their neighborhood is dysfunctional or their household is dysfunctional. That normalized chaos they're used to, they take it with them everywhere they go. When they behave in that normalized chaotic fashion, that's not acceptable to the outside world of their four corners of their block or their home, and when they're held accountable by either the teachers or by a police officer or someone that's an authority figure, everyone focuses on how they were handled by the authority figure, and they never hold the child or the person accountable for their actions that brought on the accountability. And then here we have this now perpetuation of community distrust. And I think to the extent the distrust only comes from the person who's an authority figure not accepting the fact that this person came from a disadvantaged community or a disadvantaged predicament. It's almost like they should be allowed to have a pass. It's almost like a disability. Like if a person is in a wheelchair, we cannot expect them to get up and run to their fullest potential, assuming that they're in a wheelchair because something is wrong with their lower extremities. And so people who come from dysfunctional communities, it's almost like if we're going to label it a disability, right? Not saying that people are disabled who come from dysfunctional communities, but if we're going to label that condition of coming from an underserved community as a potential disability, then we should not expect them to act right. And as a result of not expecting them to act right, we shouldn't hold them accountable whenever they cut up. That math does not math. Here's another reality. If a child breaks rules in school, they will break laws. What I found to be a tendency, right, is that when a child who comes from an underserved community breaks rules in school, there would be certain teachers, popular teachers typically, who advocate for that child. Even though that they did wrong, they advocated for them in a way that made them avoid being held accountable. And so they sort of kind of created second chances upon second chances for that child, and that child always had a level of allegiance to those individuals who got them out of the trouble that they put themselves in. So when we talk about a child coming from an underserved community or a dysfunctional family where chaos is normalized and they operate in that chaotic state in an environment that doesn't accept it, and then you got someone who defends that child or advocates for them because they have a level of empathy or sympathy for that child's predicament as if it were a disability, what they do is they set that child up for opportunities to go to prison. Because the child starts to develop this invincibility fable where, oh, I could do whatever I want and I can get away with it because someone's going to advocate for me because, you know, look at where I come from, and I come from bad environment, I come from a dysfunctional family, so, hey, you know, have some mercy on me whenever I make a poor decision. You only get a second chance one time, and anybody, listen, here's a reality. If you don't know how to manage your freedom, somebody else is going to do it for you. That's just the hard knock life. And so it's unfortunate that most, I ain't gonna say all, kids who get that pass don't take it as a blessing and learn from it. They keep going because they assume that they got a pass to be invincible and do whatever they want. And so those teachers who advocate for them instead of holding them accountable do more harm than good in that predicament. Because when they get out here in the streets and they start cutting up and wilding out and hurting people, be it domestic violence cases, robbing people, shooting people, breaking into houses, pistol whipping people, all because no one held them accountable when they were younger. They were never put in a predicament to recognize how their thinking, flawed thinking, has consequences. The other thing that I want to make clear about dysfunctional families or underserved communities, right, or people who come from underserved communities, is that it's not only about this. What I'm talking about is not only limited to kids that come from impoverished communities. I'm also talking about kids that come from suburbia and some of the well-to-do neighborhoods as well. Oh, they got dysfunction over there too. Make no mistake about it. They just don't you don't hear much about it because they're connected to the right people to keep their stuff out of the media. But it's heavy over there too. Dysfunctional families out the wazoo. And a lot of it comes from, I'm gonna tell you at the core, this is what it comes from. Unavailable parents. That's just what it boils down to. And when I say unavailable parents, it could be parents that are absent, maybe because they said, man, bump this, I ain't trying to stay with this person who I had a kid with, or maybe their parents died, and maybe one or more of their parents died, or maybe they have to work all the time, so they're not available that way, or maybe this parent is emotionally unavailable because of the way they were raised, and so they just, all they know is what they know. Their parents were not emotionally available to them, so now they're not emotionally available to their child, right? You got so the availability looks different depending upon the situation, but make no mistake about it, regardless of socioeconomic status, children who behave in a normalized, chaotic way have unmet needs that they are attempting to communicate with this chaotic behavior. They're communicating, I need this deficit filled. I need this malnourishment attended to. This lack of nurturing I have, I need it addressed with a hug or someone to just understand that I've been hurt and I don't know what to do with it. So normalize chaos. Let me just give you all what I got inside of me. I'm hurt, so somebody else got to hurt too. I'm dysfunctional here, so I'm going to create dysfunction in this classroom. I'm going to create dysfunction in the school. I'm going to create dysfunction at work. I'm going to create dysfunction in my community because that's how they feel inside. And unfortunately, everybody ain't a skilled therapist like me to be able to read through behaviors and recognize that all that baby needs is a hug. All that baby needs is some TLC. And they'll act right. The reality is that people who come from underserved communities or dysfunctional families, they don't trust. It's the first thing that goes out the window. The people that they loved, the people that they relied upon, the people that they trusted, violated them by not being available or rejecting them or dismissing them, or in whatever way. That individual who's out there wilding out suffered an emotional wound that they're making decisions from. They're making decisions from their pain points. And that's why hurt people hurt people. Hurt people do what? Also love hanging out with other hurt people, because what we say, misery loves company. And hurt people also like getting to relationships with other hurt people because the trauma bonding is an understanding that they misrepresent as love. And guess what happens? They create more normalized chaos. Now, I'm speaking from the lens, right, of a licensed clinical mental health counselor who is a retired underserved community representative, and also a former police officer who was also from a underserved community working in law enforcement. And oh, make no mistake about it. Listen, there are many police officers today that are in this line of work of law enforcement who come from underserved communities and dysfunctional families. Make no mistake about it. So they're familiar too with that abnormal thinking, which is why they do the damn job. Because anybody in their right mind wouldn't go into law enforcement today, which is why they got a recruitment and retention issue. Not because it's a job that people are not interested in. Being a police officer is a noble job, but people are not interested in law enforcement simply because of the gossip traveling faster than facts, which is basically people's perception of the profession who are also in the profession. Saying, you know what, nah, don't even waste your time applying for this crap. It's ridiculous what we gotta go through. You don't wanna put yourself through it. And so the marketing or the mouthpiece of how we get more officers to come in the door is being sabotaged by people within the profession who, and I would agree, are dealing with a lot of bull crap. Not from the community per se, but from their administration, who don't value their wellness in the context of understanding that these people are humans, yet they're viewed as expendable expendable numbers. Like, we can replace you any given day. Hey, we got missions and we got an objective that you need to adhere to. And the mission and the objective matter way more than the way you feel. Suck it up, buttercup. That kind of mentality, nobody wants to work, or no one can thrive over a period of time in that environment. And unfortunately, man, some people pigeonhole themselves in the profession because it's how they pay their bills, it's how they eat. And so they figure out a way to strategically make it do what it do day to day. But I say all that to say that people who come from disadvantaged communities, underserved communities, dysfunctional families are everywhere. And again, people who come from those environments live according to a normalized chaos, okay? And when they come out of that environment and they go wherever they go and they operate in this normalized chaos, and they get held accountable for that chaos that they cause in an environment that is not used to the chaos or doesn't accept it, or the etiquette is just incorrect, right? The environment where they're behaving like a chaotic individual is not accepting of that behavioral pattern, and they're checked. No one who's from a dysfunctional community or an underserved community ever looks at how that normalized chaos is the root as to why that officer took action against them, because it's normal. So people are blind to that normalized chaos, but they look at how the accountability piece didn't line up with the potential quote unquote disability of the individual who comes from a community that never equipped them to know how to behave themselves in environments that expect well-behaved people. That's the issue at the end of the day. So now y'all know what the solution is, right? And I don't need to articulate the solution, because you know what it is. At the end of the day, mental health is a thing, and it's not really even a mental health issue. It's just a matter of people not having the right guides, not having the right mentors, not having the right people to coach them up, to help them develop the skill sets on how to navigate life on life's terms. That's all it is. A person who comes from an underserved community lacks skill sets on how to live life according to life's terms. That's it. And so it takes somebody like me, who's a reformed underserved community participant. Oh, and I was about that action when it came to that underserved behavioral pattern, normalized chaos. Oh, chaos was I woke up to that, and I performed and behaved in that controlled environment. Normalized chaos, organized chaos, if you will. And again, it didn't profit me anything. It didn't work to my advantage, right? You either lose a lot, you lose your freedom, you lose your life, you lose your job, you lose a lot of things. You lose sleep, you lose peace, you lose love, you lose a lot of things when you stick to the ingredients associated with normalized chaos that comes from an underserved community. So I am a reformed, underserved person. I know a lot of reformed, underserved people who went to prison, came out, and now they acting right because they had a time out. They sat down and they had a pause, time to reflect. Oh yeah, that didn't make sense. Then they read a couple books, met a couple people who now have a higher level of maturity, and as a result, now they're reformed. You ain't got to go to prison to get reformed now. You just got to connect with the right people, and then you can restructure your thought pattern. And so people, kids, and I see them all the time, especially in my organization at ASOP, Achieving Success on Purpose. You know, we work with a lot of families that come from some of these underserved communities. That's who we target, so that we can teach them the insights on how to make better decisions. And we're very effective at doing it. So yes, if you got a child that's 12 to 17 years old, sign them up for our program. If you are from an underserved community, they involved with trouble with the law, they going down the wrong path, or they got bad grades, or they cutting up in school, they ain't listening to you. If you the parent or the guardian, they ain't listening, send them over to us. Yo, promise you, we'll take good care of them. We'll get them right. We got some good formulas that meet our multicultural population, our black, brown, and white kids. We got kids from all different ethnicities that come to see us. Really, really proud of that diversity. Because again, this is not just a black thing or a white thing or a Latino thing. It's everybody, anybody. Dysfunctional families exist in every ethnicity. Believe me when I tell you, all right? So You know, no one's unique. Sometimes we may feel like we're by ourselves, but we're really not. A lot of people are going through the same thing, but shame and fear of being embarrassed that, one is going through that, will keep people silent. And they never talk about the challenges that they're going through, and it happens to everybody. Again, white, black, Latino, Asian, Indian, it don't matter. Everybody's going through it, and I've seen them all. So I hope this creates some clarity, not only for the people. If you're a civilian or community member, you understand that, there's some police officers that are in the profession, despite what you think about the uniform, your perception of the uniform, who come from dysfunctional families, who come from underserved communities, and they were able to get into law enforcement. So they're used to the chaos too. They got some act right, and they're legal. They are legally allowed to carry guns and put you in check if you step out of bounds, all right? With their cloaked, underserved mentality. Again, I was one of them. Shameless. I was one of them. Like I said, today I'm retired and I'm reformed from that underserved mentality. I've evolved from it. But then, too, the people who come from underserved communities who don't know no better, right? Whose ignorance is bliss, who feel invincible and feel like they can go wherever they want and do that rah-rah stuff at basketball games, at football games, at the club, or wherever they go. They feel like they can take that normalized chaos and implement it wherever they go. And when they get checked, you have to understand every effect began with a cause. Every effect began with a cause. We can't just look at the effect and disregard the cause. Now, are police officers always right in what they do in terms of how they react and respond to whatever people are doing? Not 100%, but they're flawed just like anybody else is at the end of the day. And I'm not making any excuses for anybody, but what I'm saying is for us to specifically not be delusional and recognize how people who come from underserved communities operate in normalized chaos that people who have to enforce the law address and hold them accountable. And when they hold them accountable in whatever way it looks like, we can't ultimately throw stones at the officer if they're just doing their job against somebody who doesn't recognize how their normalized chaos created that outcome. And that goes for the person who received the accountability measure and the people who are connected to that person, who again come from the same environment. So they're always going to look at the normalized chaos, or I should say that they're always going to overlook the normalized chaos because, again, it's something that's in their blind spot. It's normal to them, but abnormal to the outside world. So there you have it, folks. That's my breakdown about underserved communities normalizing chaos. This is Dr. P. Stress left underdressed creates a mess. Find a counselor.